Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Obviously, a day in which our state is clearly dealing with heavy hearts and clearly trying to make sense of an unspeakable tragedy around Appalachia High School. We'll have a couple of words on that on today's program, and we'll also kind of settle in and do what we're supposed to do every day, no matter what the circumstances are, which is find a way to talk about Georgia football and find a way to try to have some fun in light of whatever might be going on out there at any given time. So we'll try to do both those things here today. I think it's a really good interview with Jake Fromm coming up before we're done today. Terrence Edwards back on the show today there as well. There is one thing in the lead up to Georgia and Tennessee Tech I have gotten very wrong today. You'll have a chance to laugh at me about that. We'll also laugh at Billy Napier today in a way that I think you're going to really enjoy before the show is done here today, too. We'll kind of look at what's next for a playmaker that perhaps emerged for UGA on Saturday. How much of that can we expect to see going forward? And to kick things off here today there as well, what exactly is the expectation for Georgia against such an overmatched opponent like Tennessee Tech on Saturday? We'll kind of dive in and sort of talk about what we do and don't know about all of that here today. So a lot of ground to cover. Very happy to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I promise we will do today what you expect us to do, which is talk Georgia football and try to have some fun and keep you entertained. Of course, we're going to do our job as it relates to all that here today, but it just seems impossible because of where we are right here in the state of Georgia. It seems impossible to begin the show, to do the show without acknowledging the horrible, unspeakable tragedy at Appalachia High School yesterday and the 4 lives that were lost in that, terrible shooting. And in talking to some of our video audience before the show began today, I think I am in a similar position to some of you in that, to be completely honest with you, and I don't know if this is the right thing or not, but this is just the way that my wife and I have lived our lives. We have made a decision as parents to protect our children's innocence at all costs, to let them be kids as long as they possibly can. And this December, my son will be a teenager, and so some of that starts to slip away just based on his. But nonetheless, we've tried to hold on to that and preserve that for as long as we possibly can. We're very, very selective about the kind of content we allow into our home. And sometimes that means we don't just have the news on, right? It's like we're not pumping in all of the scary stuff going on in the world at all given times. We just don't do that really. But when you have a moment like this at Appalachia High School yesterday, because of a lot of reasons, we just had too much proximity to that. We were too close to that for a million different reasons to pretend that it didn't happen and not kind of lean into some of the scariness of it and the confusing nature of it. And I think many of you sort of felt the same way. And when you kind of get into that and you pray out loud by name for so many of the people who were impacted by this that we're aware of, and when you kind of just sort of try to make sense of all of that, I mean, as parents, the message that you then send is, okay, in light of all of this, we got to try to find a way to be brave. We got to try to find a way to live without fear, dig deep into our faith, and find a way not to be afraid. And in saying that to my kids yesterday, I was just thinking about how different that message is than the one that my parents would have given to me. Because back when I was a kid, it's, Daddy, I think I hear something under the bed, or I think there's something going on in the closet. There's a noise. And, back then the message from parent to child seemed to be there's nothing to be afraid of. And now with a straight face and an honest voice, I can't say to my kids, there's always nothing to be afraid of. We found out yesterday that at times there is a evil or just a I guess evil is just the right word. There is an evil that's out there that maybe we do need to be afraid of, and yet still finding a way to live with faith, live without fear in light of all that. That is still our challenge and our cause and what we're supposed to do. You already know I'm not going to try to solve this problem here on these airs because that's not what this show is for. but we do feel pain, we do feel sadness, we do feel the confusion and the fear that everybody else feels. And so to do the job that we're paid to do, sometimes you sort of have to acknowledge the atmosphere in which we're doing it, and that is clearly the atmosphere that exists around this show, our state, and so many of the people in our state today. And it's always awkward to kind of go from that to what we do, but we also don't know anything else other than kind of push on and try to figure out how to make sense of the topic we typically discuss. So in awkward fashion, I'm going to transition now and try to talk a little bit about Georgia football, because it is a little bit of an unusual game that Georgia prepares to play on Saturday. Obviously, college football is kind of the only sport where you get these incredible mismatches. Like, it's almost not even possible to get this in any other sport other than college football, where a team like Georgia, that just seems like the kind of behemoth that could conquer the entire world, is now going to take on a team like Tennessee Tech, which, I mean, a lot of us love college football. We couldn't tell you one thing about the program from Cookeville, Tennessee. They did play close with Middle Tennessee State on Saturday, but it was also a costly game in which the is it the Eagles? Is that what Tennessee Tech is? The Eagles. Their quarterback, was got hurt in the game. Now that didn't stop Tennessee Tech from giving it a run there in Murfreesboro on Saturday, but nonetheless, the mismatch here just feels so stark. The imbalance between these two teams just feels so stark, and that is apparently not lost on the Tennessee Tech program. Its coach talking to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and not exactly sounding super excited about playing this game against Georgia on Saturday. In fact, let me show you the headline as it was printed and published in the AJC. Tennessee Tech, quote, not thrilled to face number 1 Georgia between the hedges. And I actually kind of learned something within the last couple of weeks that I never really knew, at least based on some anecdotal evidence. I've learned this. I always sort of thought that if you were a player that had a chance to go to like an FCS school, one of these programs like that, the fact that your team would play at Georgia, or Furman, who played at Ole Miss, or Chattanooga, who played at Tennessee, or one of these programs like this, that if you're one of those teams that got a chance to play in an SEC stadium, I kind of always assumed that was probably a little bit of a selling point. Hey, come to our school because you'll get a chance to play on TV. We'll go play in an SEC stadium. You'll get a chance to play in the highest level of college football possible. I always assumed that was probably like a positive for players who go to programs like that. But I was talking the other day to somebody whose like nephew or something was on one of these like FCS teams that has to go play these kind of games every year. And he was talking about how much they all hate it. They don't like it. That it's a necessity when it comes to like paying for the program. But, you'd rather be playing a conference game, trying to qualify for the FCS playoffs, playing a team of your same level, a team where, the competition is just better because it's a little bit more of a fair fight, that these programs do this because financially they're essentially required to, just to keep the lights on, but they actually really don't like doing it very much. And this is before the Tennessee Tech coach said what he said, but it reminded me of that because there is this sense out there that this is just not very much fun. You get kicked around, you get beat on, you pay the bills for the rest of the year, but it's not a very dignified experience for the teams that have to come in here and be kind of a glorified punching bag. For a program like Georgia. So perhaps Tennessee Tech sort of speaking out this way about this game coming into this week, maybe there is just a sort of sense of realism in all of that. And at Kirby Smart's press conference on Tuesday night, he was kind of asked about this. Tennessee Tech, their coach says he's not all that excited about coming in here on Saturday. He's not thrilled about this. And Kirby Smart gave a very blunt response back to all of that. And also, as Kirby Smart kind of does from time to time, kind of a realistic appraisal of the current landscape of college football about whether or not these games should even be played or not. This is Kirby Smart at sort of his most realistic and honest best, I think, and it's a fair conversation moving into Saturday. So here's the blunt response from Kirby on the complaints from Cookeville and the, I think, more realistic assessment of the landscape as these major power conference teams, at least for now, are still playing these FCS teams on a fairly regular basis. Kirby Smart from Tuesday night.
Does he still want the check?
He said he absolutely did. He said, but there's no other way really for them to do it than that,
Well, that's my point. I mean, everybody can put me in a pigeonhole of, well, Kirby believes in these games, Kirby doesn't believe in these games. I believe in the sport of football. And if you told me that the sport of football is going to lose programs because they can't sustain without the financial help, then I want to support that. I also want the financial support of our fan base. And if you polled them, they'd rather us play, Clemson, Notre Dame, every week play somebody. And I respect that too. I enjoy that. I coached in the NFL. I've been around those kind of leagues. I mean, I'm sensitive to both of those things. I just think that if we're going to lose football at a lower level because of financial reasons, I'd rather try to sustain those programs and keep them up. Which, by the way, the quarterback he brought in played really well too, and is a really good athlete. And I hate it for the other kid because obviously he was the starter.
So I think that's a really realistic assessment from Kirby Smart right there, which is, listen, I don't want these programs to go out of business because we don't fund them. So therefore, from that standpoint, I'm in favor of football. And yet at the same time, what you did not hear Kirby Smart say, and many times in the past you've sort of also not heard Kirby Smart, say this, is what Kirby Smart did not say is, man, I love these games, man. I love seeing my team in a situation like this. Kirby kind of bumps into an acknowledgement that it's not obvious that these games will be played in the future, and it's certainly not a ringing endorsement from Kirby Smart that they should be played in the future. He just simply says, listen, if I can help fund these programs, that's what I sort of want to do. But it's not like he's like, man, I love the football that's going to be played on Saturday. If you're really listening, you got a fairly even-handed statement from Kirby Smart, sort of on both sides of a pretty intriguing topic that I think we'll be wrestled with. In 2020 pandemic year, we didn't see these types of games being played, which I think to a possible degree, could foreshadow what might perhaps happen in the future. So what does all this lead us to for Saturday? The Tennessee Tech coach says, we're not that excited about doing this. I've heard other folks around FCS programs sort of say the same thing before. But I think if we're also being honest, there's an element of which, like for Georgia, that's maybe kind of true there as well, where it's like, hey, last week you got the big Mercedes-Benz Stadium backdrop, huge spotlight against Clemson, and there is no doubt a major step down in intensity and emotion for a game like this against Tennessee Tech, and that is just unavoidably true for UGA. In fact, let me give you, as a way of kind of bolstering this point, a chance to laugh at me here for a second, because we do a show each week called Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Now, I'd say that if you care about point spreads and things like that, our show's actually been pretty good against the spread the last few years. For the most part, we're really giving you far more winners than not. So if you care about that kind of thing, it's maybe worth tuning into to hear our picks. But this week, obviously the sort of marquee pick for us is always the Georgia game. Leading into the game, we have to pre-record it before it airs on Friday. A little bit hard to kind of find a point spread for Georgia and Tennessee Tech. So, I had to sort of make one up, and I kind of fancy myself someone who understands odds a little bit. So I thought I can handicap this game. I'll make a spread for this game. Well, I could not have gotten it more wrong, because the spread that we used for the show, and you'll see this on Friday because we've already recorded it, was 44.5. I had Georgia as a 44.5 point favorite. An opinion I'll defend myself on here in a moment. However, we've now seen some real spreads start to come out. FanDuel's got one posted. I'll show you this on the screen here. Obviously, FanDuel, kind of one of the market leaders when it comes to sports wagering and sports books. They've actually got the number at 53.5 in terms of a favor for Georgia. If you care about the total, it's 62.5. So that's about what you got for Georgia and Tennessee Tech there on Saturday. Dogs favored by 53.5 points. Now, let me kind of tie this into the topic we were just discussing. If I'm being completely honest here, and obviously FanDuel does this for a living, there is no way in my mind that Georgia's supposed to be a 53.5 point favorite in this game. There is no way. Not because Georgia's not obviously way better, or even that much better than Tennessee Tech. Mathematically, on paper, that's maybe what they are. But when it comes to how the game's actually played on the field, it is seemingly just sort of a different kind of Georgia in a game like this against Tennessee Tech than the sort of effort and the intensity that you get against an opponent like Clemson. And if you don't believe me, let me go back through the recent past here for a moment. In the last 10 games in which Georgia's been favored by 40 or more points, Georgia's just 0-9-1 against the spread in those games. I'll run through this quickly. Didn't cover a 40-point number last year against UAB. They pushed on a 42-point number against Ball State, did not cover a 50.5-point number against UT Martin, didn't cover a 45-point number against Kent State in 2022. When they were 53-point favorites against Samford in 22, they only won the game, 37-0, something like that, far below the actual posted total. 52.5 didn't cover that against Charleston Southern in 2021, didn't cover a 40-point number against Missouri in 2021, so even against an SEC foe. 49.5 didn't cover that against Murray State in 2019. Also didn't cover 41.5 against UMass in 2018. And then in a shortened kind of quick clock game against Austin Peay in 2018, also did not cover the 46 there in that spot. So I think that Tennessee Tech is saying, we're not thrilled about playing this game on Saturday. I would say that Georgia's results in the past when being favored by 40 or more points sort of suggest that they're maybe not all that thrilled about these kinds of games from time to time either. At least the result would certainly suggest that, which sort of, I think, leads me to the final point that I want to make. When it comes to Saturday, I think that if you're expecting some sort of laser show, some sort of firework display of eye-popping, what is it? Ole Miss scored 70 whatever points against Furman the other day, some of these games that you've seen. I just don't think that's what you're going to see from UGA. I really don't. I think that Georgia, maybe more so than ever, sees the 2024 schedule as a schedule unlike any's ever been, where you're going to be tested on the road next week at Kentucky for the first SEC game. A couple of weeks after that, on the road at Alabama, big game against Texas looming. Obviously, the month of November's got a handful of landmines there as well. And I think you want to be as ready as possible for those games, as deep as possible as those games. And one line of thought is, well, therefore, you need to play more players and get them more involved and try to create your depth in a game like Tennessee Tech. And to a certain extent, maybe Georgia will try to do that. But there's also kind of a flip side here, which is maybe what you see from Georgia on Saturday in a game like Tennessee Tech, and this is not the greatest advertisement for the game, streaming it on ESPN Plus or whatever, or being there in the stadium, but it may nonetheless be honest and true, which is that this may be just one of those deals where Georgia is just as eager to get the game over as Tennessee Tech is, to kind of rest up, stay as healthy as possible, getting ready for a big road trip next week against a Kentucky team that wants to try to do, something of note against UGA. Obviously, extra motivation for a couple of the guys in the field there wearing blue that day. We may just see Georgia try to get in and get out, get it over with, and move on to the following week. The point spread trends when Georgia's been favored somewhere near as high as they are on Saturday would certainly suggest that's the case. So FanDuel says the number is supposed to be, 53.5? There's no way that's true. Even at 44.5, I don't think Georgia covers this number because that's not typically what Georgia does. So go there, be there on time, because the Dogs might be looking to get this one over as quick as possible on Saturday. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. We're glad you're here. No matter how you get to us on video across all platforms at 10 a.m., radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. So glad that you are a part of the show here today. And a big thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp who make it all possible. I know Bob and Ashley Tharp were having a great time at that Georgia game on Saturday. They love being there. When the Dogs, beat Clemson, or this week in Athens, I'm sure they'll stop by and see us, as they frequently do, at the UGA bookstore after the game for our DawgNation post-game show. And yet during the week, Bob's working as hard as ever to kind of help people in a time of need when it comes to their divorce process. I actually met somebody on Saturday, our DawgNation tailgate, and they were kind of, laughing about this. Obviously, enough time had passed, but they went through a divorce situation. They said, listen, I chose Merriweather and Tharp, BA. I had heard what you'd said about them, and I wanted to, kind of use them, and that's what happened. And so obviously Merriweather and Tharp is taking care of a lot of folks in our audience. In an audience the size of ours, just the statistical fact of the matter is a good number of people either gone through divorce or considering that as an option for the future. That's who Merriweather and Tharp wants to serve all across the state of Georgia. That's why their website's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. And because they've had so much experience in this situation, they've listened to people, heard their stories, and kind of recognize some commonalities and shaping the level of service they provide now to kind of deal with some of this. One of the things that comes up over and over again is the notion of cost certainty. How much does it cost to go through this? How much is this going to cost me to do what I feel like needs to be done here. And with that in mind, Meriwether and Tharp kind of offers you a menu and a range of options here. If you feel like your situation is fairly straightforward, well, you can get a DIY service that's as low as $99. Or if you feel like, this is complicated, there's some emotion here, there's some extenuating circumstances here, then you can get the traditional coverage that Meriwether and Tharp is famous for. But also, one of the things that's probably become their most popular level of service here at the moment is what they call their Model M&T, which is an option for like a flat rate price or a monthly service fee, almost like a subscription that's ongoing while your divorce process is ongoing. Just sort of a creative way to provide you some cost certainty about how it's going to be to get through this divorce process here. So please find them online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Find out what I say and why it's true that Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, on our program here today, we've got two really good guests here coming up. Before we're done, Jake Fromm is going to be a part of the program here today. We'll celebrate the good news that Jake got last week, being announced as a part of the Detroit Lions organization. But also one of the best things from Jake today, we recorded this earlier, one of the best things from Jake today is a little bit of a look at, you go back to last week, slow start for Georgia offensively in the first half, obviously a big explosion in the third quarter, second half. What was the difference there? How come Georgia was more effective offensively in the second half than it was in the first half? Jake's going to give you some good stuff on that coming up here in just a couple of minutes. We've also got Terrence Edwards coming up in a moment there as well. Prior to that, I'm going to go around the doghouse here today. And speaking of Terrence, obviously the great former Georgia wide receiver, I want to talk a little bit about a guy that I'll be looking forward to watching closely on Saturday as Georgia takes on Tennessee Tech. That's London Humphreys. Humphreys had a really good game for Georgia against Clemson. Big third down catch that set up a touchdown drive. Humphreys, after that, got a touchdown catch there as well. There was a lot to like about London Humphreys, the former Vanderbilt wide receiver, in his debut for UGA. And one of the things we said about Humphreys a lot during the offseason is that I don't think people fully appreciate and fully realize how much Humphreys had played for Vanderbilt a year ago. Now you say, well, it's just Vanderbilt, not a very good team. That's true. But it's still an SEC team that he's lining up across from. And you can make a case that when you look at, receivers who were freshmen in the SEC last year, that Humphreys was one of the more productive freshman pass catchers in our league a year ago. That's the kind of year he had. It wasn't a huge year for freshman wide receivers, but Humphreys was playing almost as much as anybody and contributing almost as much as any freshman in this league was a year ago, to his credit. And then obviously he put that talent and experience on display on Saturday. And a couple of times here this week, we've heard Kirby Smart talk about what he liked about Humphreys in that game against Clemson, and the way in which really in his first game for Georgia, he helped propel the offense and kind of create an opportunity for an easy Georgia win. Let's start with this. Going back to Saturday afternoon after the game, Kirby Smart talked about the impact that London made on that game. This is Kirby from Saturday.
Yeah, London, I thought, really stepped up. I thought the play of the game was the play he called over the middle. Dillon had gone down with some cramping. London had to step up and go play. He made a great catch. I think it was a third down conversion. I'm not sure. But once we converted that, it kind of was a springboard to being explosive and scoring. And I thought that was a clutch catch. London is a great kid. He's very level-headed. Nothing really affects him. It didn't surprise me in the moment that the moment wasn't too big for him because he's played in a lot of these SEC matchups.
So he stepped up, and Kirby Smart said, and this phrase kind of always sort of stands out to me. It's sort of a sports talky type of phrase. The moment wasn't too big for him. And when I hear Kirby Smart say something like that, in this spot, high-pressure game, the moment wasn't too big for London Humphreys, it makes me kind of wonder, okay, what about future moments? What about on the road against Alabama in a few weeks here? What about, other big games on what we hope is another national championship season for Georgia? Is what we saw from London on Saturday a possible foreshadowing of how big of a part he could be of this Georgia offense going forward? I think there's a chance that, yeah, you know what, maybe that is true, because what Kirby just said there was not the only instance this week of Kirby kind of shedding some light on kind of how he feels that London Humphreys is fitting into the Georgia offense. This is what he said about London on Monday.
Yeah, it's great. He does a good job. He's probably more in relief for Arian, and he did a good job. He's got SEC experience. I think that's what the portal provides you to go get a guy that's been successful and played well in our conference. And he's done that. He's proven himself as a guy that can make plays, and he was ready when his number was called. And we talk about it all the time, is your opportunity's coming. Are you going to seize the moment when the moment jumps in front of you? And he did that.
In fairness to the great production staff who makes our show hum so smoothly every single day, the popping of the P's there from Kirby Smart was the podium mic at UGA. That was not our audio there with that when it comes to the popping of the P's from Kirby from his press conference there on Monday. But once again, a very interesting phrase being used by Kirby, which is, hey, when the moment came, he seized the moment. And at a place like Georgia, that's just really important because the roster is deep and it is talented. And the fight for playing time is a crowded one. And a lot of guys want those touches. And on Saturday against Clemson, it seemed to be London Humphreys' turn. And he made the most of that opportunity. And it makes you wonder, is that a setup for even more opportunities in the future? Because, Carson Beck sort of found like 9 different receivers on Saturday. So in one line of thought, well, maybe it's just a different person every game, and maybe that's how it'll actually be. When a guy comes up as big as London did in 2 specific moments in that game, you're left to wonder if we couldn't end up seeing a whole lot more of him before it's all said and done. And that is Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp here today. So we're loaded, very, very busy. Before we're done, we're going to have a lot of fun with a guy that we've kicked around a whole bunch here this week. Wait till you see what we have for Billy Napier today. It's on the desk. I'll show you more of this a little bit later on. Really, really good stuff. We'll do all of that before we're done. Great interview with Jake Fromm there as well. When it comes to talking about wide receivers and everything that happened for Georgia, also no better voice for us to hear from on a day like this than our good friend Terrence Edwards. Here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Let's talk to the great former Georgia wide receiver.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Happy to have Terrence Edwards on the program. And, of course, Terrence Edwards is a guy that wears many hats, as you can see if you're watching on video, representing Mount Vernon, the school for whom he's a head coach for. And, obviously, Terrence, for coaches like you across the state, so much, sadness here today because what happened to Appalachia yesterday and the fact that Ricky Aspinwall, the, defensive coordinator for Appalachia, was one of those that lost their lives there. As a representative of the coaching community, now he's obviously the football coach, not the only one here, but, some of that probably hits us a little harder as it relates to Coach Aspinwall just because of the time that you and I both spent around high school football. As a coach, what does a story like that mean to you?
It means a lot. I just think from a bigger perspective is the school system is a place where we send our kids to. All of us send our kids, and it's a place supposed to be a place of peace, a safe place, a safe haven for our children, and just for people to go and disturb that peace with this type of senseless violence, just mind-boggling to me. And I just hope the world just take notice, just be great human beings to people. And this has no political voice whatsoever. I don't think either party should be trying to use this as a narrative to push their agenda. These are young men, young women, and a beloved coach that's lost their life for senseless death. And I just want people just to realize that no matter what you're affiliated with, let's have some decency amongst our brothers, and just love on people. That's my big thing. Just love on people.
Terrence, that's beautifully said. You are a very wise man, and I'm glad that you had a chance to share that message because I think everything you're saying is 100% true. I really appreciate that. And as I told our audience a moment ago, when you kind of get back to football, it's never, smooth and easy to make that transition, but a lot of people are obviously very eager to hear your thoughts about the game on Saturday. And one of the guys we were just talking about was London Humphreys. And look, there are a lot of Georgia wide receivers who have a chance to play and want to play. They want to get touches, and kind of figuring out who fits in where is not an easy thing to do for us, probably even for these coaches there either. My gosh, Terrence, London made a big third down catch. That sets up a touchdown drive. Later on, he had a touchdown himself. Is that a preview? Is Humphreys going to be that kind of player for Georgia this year, or was that perhaps an example of, well, it was just sort of his turn and maybe it's somebody else's turn in future games? Like, what did you think in particular here about what Humphreys was able to do on Saturday?
I wasn't surprised. I heard the soundbite that Kirby said about the moment wasn't too big, and nothing against Clemson. This is a top-notch program in a atmosphere at the Mercedes-Benz. But London Humphreys scored a touchdown against Georgia last year. So what moment is bigger than that, playing against the number one team at the time? And he had an opportunity to go and compete and actually scored a touchdown. So these moment isn't going to be too big for him because he's played a lot of SEC football and played against Georgia last year and played very well. So it was his turn. When you get the opportunity to produce, you got to go out there and show your skill set, and that's what he did.
So is it true that Humphreys is kind of is he a Z receiver? Is that the position he plays? You know, I'm not a former coach. I'm not an X's and O's expert. Is Humphreys is he a Z receiver, kind of lining up on the wide side of the field? Is that kind of how he's mostly being used right now?
I didn't really pay attention to where they're using him, but just from what I've seen from him, I think he's able to line up anywhere in the formation. I don't like to pigeonhole receivers to a Z or X, because you have to move everyone around so you won't get the double teams or you won't get the safeties rotating to you. So I think he's a receiver that he is a plug and play. If someone went down, like Dylan Bell went down with cramp, he can be plugged into that position. That tells me that they trust him and he knows the offense very well to be a plug and play type of receiver.
Yeah, so I guess beyond that, I want to talk more about Arian Smith in particular here in a moment, because it seemed like he had a really interesting package of plays for him. But as far as how Humphreys fit in with the rest of those wide receivers, like, what did you make of that group overall for Saturday?
The same thing that I've been saying. I don't think we have a 1A alpha. I just don't think we have that A.J. Green, George Pickens type receiver, and that's okay. We have a lot of receivers that can make plays when their number is called. Kobe Young with the touchdown. Dominic Lovett has the opportunity to make plays. Humphreys made plays. Dylan Bell made plays. The tight end made plays. So you can go and spread the ball around, and now defenses can't really pinpoint who's going to get the ball and what we want to take away for us the passing game. So everyone made plays when their number was called, and that's how you win football games.
And it seemed like in the case of Arian Smith, it was early in the game in methods that we haven't always seen Georgia utilize and get the ball to him. Whether it's building his confidence or just trying to take advantage of his speed, it seemed like Mike Bobo was trying to get pretty creative in how they were using Smith on Saturday. Did you notice that? And what did you think about the sort of, I would say, pretty interesting ways they were trying to get Arian going?
Yes, this is one player that I was probably going to shift the topic to, even if you didn't ask me about him. I just was so proud of him for how he played last year and all the criticism that he got last year about his ability to catch the football. And I just think Coach Bobo and the offensive staff did a great job of utilizing his skill set. Like, he's probably not the most just natural receiver, because if you go back to Lakeland High, he was what you call a wing back in a wing tee type of offense. So we use him in a traditional way that he was used to coming out of high school, using him as a jet sweep guy because he is that fast. So I just love the way that he played. That builds confidence in him, knowing that they believe in me. He played, that's probably the best I've seen him play in a totality of a game. He was blocking, he was catching. He did everything that he was asked to do, and he did it well.
Exactly right. And he's also one of those guys that sort of a testament to sticking with it, right? This is a guy who's battled injury, who's had to fight for playing time, who's had to kind of show that he deserves to be on the field. And this is one of those things that has obviously a tangible value to the Dogs on the field and a little bit of an intangible value in terms of what he represents to the other receivers in this room of, this is what it looks like to stick with it. This is what it looks like to keep fighting. This is what it looks like to keep, showing what you're all about here. And I think that Arian Smith's presence as a part of the game plan on Saturday, but just a presence on the field, is also a pretty good example for the other receivers to follow too, right?
I think so. I just got one thing to say. He is a true definition of a damn good dog.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right, because it means more than just your contribution, right? It's also about the way you go about your business, right?
Most definitely. With the way the transfer portal now is fitting, that when things get tough for players, they just bolt, they leave, they get into the portal. Let's find a different situation. And why I say he's a true definition of a damn good dog is because he didn't just leave when things got tough. That mental toughness that Kirby talks about, that is a culture thing that Kirby has built in the Georgia program. Look at your quarterback. He could have had an opportunity, and I'm pretty sure there was teams in the back channels calling for Carson and calling for Arian. And those guys, they stuck to the plan. And you got to be mentally tough to play for Kirby. And this Georgia fan base, you got to be mentally tough. And Arian has been, maligned last year. And now just the way he played this first game, I'm just so proud of him, the way he just stuck it out. And once he leaves, he's a damn good dog in my book.
Let me ask you about another guy who had a couple of, or at least a big nice moment on Saturday, and that's Lawson Lucky. And look, when Georgia brought in Ben Jurasik from Stanford, I'll have to admit that I didn't really know what it meant. I mean, there was a lot to like about Jurasik. He had some, nice seasons for Stanford, kind of an all Pac-12 level performer for them a couple of different times. And yet, at the same time, it's like, okay, well, if you're bringing in the experience of Jurasik, like, what does that say about Lawson Lucky one way or another? How is he going to fit into the offense if you're going out and bringing in experience? Because we know Oscar Delp's going to be on the field. So where does Lawson Lucky fit into a team that now also wants a guy like Ben Jurasik there as well? We found out on Saturday that Lucky's going to have a chance to make a big play. He's going to have some stuff run for him, including kind of a huge catch, kind of a cool route, and a big play there in that game. So how much of what you saw from Lawson on Saturday do you think we also see from him going forward as kind of a guy who gets a chance to do some of the, I'm not saying he's Brock Bowers, but some of the playmaking stuff that Bowers has done? It seems like some of those touches may go to Lawson Lucky. What do you think about him and his moment on Saturday?
Yes, Lawson is one of those guys that I've known for a while. He's actually trained with me a lot throughout his years. And once we signed Lucky and we could go back and check this, I say he would be the best route runner that Georgia has at the tight end position. That is including Brock, that including all the guys that we've had. He is a true route runner, and the route that you're referring to is kind of a throwback route where he's seemingly going over to a deep over route, and he takes it back to the corner called a throwback route, and he sells it perfectly. And I think that play was probably put in for him just because of his route running ability. And now he brings his playmaking ability along with it. It's just a triple threat when you have a tight end who actually can run routes like a receiver. So Lawson's going to be a big part of the game plan moving forward. I think with the loss of the tight ends that we have lost, I think Georgia wanted to bring in another third tight end that has had playing time ability. That's why I think we brought in Ben. So we always like to have three tight ends that we can roll in, and I think we have three good ones.
I'm going to ask you a very simple question here, and I want you to answer it however you want to. How do you think Carson Beck played on Saturday?
I thought Carson played well. I thought it wasn't one of his best games, in my opinion. I don't think we give Clemson defense enough credit. I know we looked at their offense and we beat them 36-3, but I don't think we give their defense enough credit. That was a really good defensive team. I heard you earlier say with the slow start. I don't particularly call it a slow start. This is the first game of the year going against a legit defensively opponent. And so you got to give Clemson defense some credit of being able to slow us down. But great teams figured it out, come back after halftime with adjustments, and that's what we did. But it's the first game of the year. I thought Carson played okay, but I foresee him even getting better throughout the season.
One of the things that Kirby talks about a lot is how sort of even-keeled, level-headed Beck is around the team. And yet at the same time, boy, he comes into a game like that on Saturday with a lot of attention, famous sort of, I guess, Instagram model girlfriend, a lot of endorsement deals that get a lot of attention. NIL dollar figures get kind of thrown around here. You've been obviously a big-time player, not in the NIL era, but a big-time player. You, I think, have some sense of this. Is there an extra level of pressure on the field because of how much attention that you're getting off the field?
There is. There is some pressure that you put on yourself that you have to go out and perform up to the level of your level, up to the Georgia standards. And sometimes that's just up to the fan standard that you have to go out there and be you every week. The one thing that I will give Carson credit for is he used his legs to get us out of situations, and that was very impressive to me. So if he could continue to pick up 10 yards on a 3rd and 9 with his legs, that's just going to make himself a better player. That's going to improve the Georgia offense and just make the team better overall.
All right, so last thing, and this is not an official topic, but I know a lot of folks won't let me get out of this interview without at least bringing this up. Any chance C.J. Wiley gets a wandering eye after the rough start from Florida State? And listen, you have every right not to answer, but people are going to want me to ask you the question. Any chance you're obviously close, protege? Any chance that he maybe shops around here because things are not great in Tallahassee right now?
Well, I haven't spoken to him about it. I went to the game last week against Alpharetta, and I don't talk to him about that part of it. I'm at the game, and I'm coaching him, and I'm not even on the coaching staff at Milton anymore, and I'm still just giving him tips. I can say this. We all know Kirby, and Kirby is not going to stop until he has no more eligibility left in college. So I don't know if he would flip. I haven't spoken to him about flipping, but if we know Kirby Smart, he's not going to stop recruiting the young man because we know how in today's game, you may not get him the first time, but you may get him the second or the third time.
Terrence, that's a very good answer, and I think that's something a lot of Georgia fans were certainly curious to hear from you on. And obviously, you've done great work with C.J. Wiley over the years. By the way, I also saw Travis Smith on Friday, another guy that you've done great work with going to Tennessee. Man, how good is I promise we'll let you go here, but how good is Travis Smith? I mean, my gosh, a great obviously it wasn't a great day for Westlake against Gainesville, but Gainesville's really, really good. But, man, Smith had some beautiful catches there in that game. Just a real ability to go find the football. You've done great work with him there as well.
Yes, he is. He's taking it to another level. And I have to go ahead and give praise to another one of my proteges that's opposite of Travis is Dion.
Yeah.
So Dion Thomas is another one that had like 4 catches for 140 yards against Gainesville. And so those are two really talented, and both of them are a big receiver. So
yeah.
Travis will just take it to another level this year. And his work ethic, his explosiveness, his ability to catch the football in traffic. Tennessee is getting a really good football.
And obviously, when it comes to all this great work that you've done with guys like that, next generation kind of looking to get that same stuff. Busy right now, you're coaching, and there's not as much going on, I know, in the personal coaching front. But for people who kind of want some of the insight, you're sharing it on social media. You're still connecting with guys, too. If they want to find out more about what has been the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy, where can they get that online?
You can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, thanks for being here. I appreciate everything about you. Our audience is obviously thrilled to have you back on the show again. You just bring so much to the table, so much insight. Thank you for sharing that expertise with us, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I had to sort of sneak in the C.J. Wiley thing, and, it's like – not an official topic, right? We're not like, it's not on the rundown, but yeah, let's sort of slip it in there just to sort of see if you got something. And I don't know, can we show, for those on video, can we show the commitment video clip again? Because I just think there's a lot of information held within this. And, it's like Wiley's making the decision he's making, and it's just not – it's certainly not a jubilant euphoria around the room there as Wiley chooses Florida State. I have seen my wife look at my son the way that Wiley's mom looks at him in that situation. I sort of know what's up for my son when that happens. Maybe some of that's going on there with Wiley, who knows? But as Terrence Edwards sort of says, never say never. Second chance here on some stuff. We'll see. I don't know. Worth perhaps watching after Florida State. Not exactly off to the greatest start in the world here in the 2024 season. Can't help but notice all of that. We got another great guest coming up with Jake Fromm here in a moment. But prior to that, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And let's talk for a little bit here about Utopia of the Seas. And a lot of the people that listen to our show are fairly regular cruisers, and so you kind of know the deal here on this. But some folks, you have never cruised before, and so when I say brand new Oasis-class ship, that doesn't necessarily mean a ton to you. So let me try to kind of explain a little bit more about this. The Oasis-class ship, until the Icon class debut back in January, have been the largest class of cruise ships at sea. And what that means is that Royal Caribbean takes the parts of the ship, they kind of divide them into neighborhoods, and they put things in the neighborhoods. Entertainment options, restaurant options. And when you talk about a big ship like an Oasis-class ship such as Utopia of the Seas, you're talking about a lot of cool things to explore, including if you're watching on video right now. This is an Italian restaurant called Giovanni's. Like, how beautiful is this dining room, kind of overlooking so much of the rest of the ship? Giovanni's is on a few of the Royal Caribbean ships, but on Utopia, it's 2 stories. It's just a gorgeous space, plenty of room to sort of stretch out, one of the most popular restaurant concepts on the ship. And like Utopia of the Seas has so many little nooks and crannies like this of fun restaurants to eat at, great places to catch a drink or show, just really fun things like that. So that's why a great ship like Utopia of the Seas is worth your time. Jessica Slater is a terrific travel agent. She can tell you even more about this. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also find her online, Jay Slater, at dreamvacations.com. So as we go cruising around the SEC here for a moment, as I started the show by saying today, I don't know how much entertainment you're going to get out of Georgia Tennessee Tech on Saturday. I'm just being honest. It's not my job to sell the game. We're going to watch the game no matter what. But, how much you actually get from this game in particular, your mileage may vary when it comes to that. But I do think there are at least 3 things when it comes up to week 2 in college football that'll be well worth your time. Now, listen. We'll be diving into the depth chart on Saturday for Georgia. I'll have my binoculars out trying to see who's in the game. We'll be doing all that kind of stuff as it relates to snap counts, things like that. But the actual game itself will probably be a blowout Georgia win, much smaller than the actual point spread, if I had to guess. That's sort of the feeling there. So beyond Georgia and what may be a non-competitive and maybe not quite as entertaining a game against Tennessee Tech, what should you be watching for on Saturday? Well, I got 3 things for you to pay close attention to. I think that Texas going to Michigan is fascinating. Now, I do like Texas in this game. They are a 7.5-point favorite. It horrifies me how much this is the sort of conventional wisdom at the moment. Michigan wasn't good in week 1. Texas, was a playoff team, obviously, a year ago. You want to go back to the summer if you care about what they call look-ahead lines. These are early lines posted on games in the spring and summer for later on that fall. Texas was nowhere near this big of a favorite over Michigan, but a lot has changed since then. Michigan does not have a quarterback. I think their coaching staff's a little bit of a mess. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. They don't have Connor Stallions anymore, and that obviously helped them, in recent seasons. So I think that Texas is the right side here. But this is a Texas team, even a blowout win last week. Did you look at their rushing stuff? Did you look at, their ability to kind of replace a couple of injured running backs and sort of a key running back off last year's roster? Not great, necessarily, anyway. Here's what I'm very curious about. And if you're a Georgia fan, I do think you ought to be watching for on Saturday. Does Arch Manning play in this game? And when does he play in this game? We've been saying it now for a while, that Ewers is good, but at the same time, he may not be good enough to completely hold back Arch Manning. And there's no denying this. Some of us wondered, okay, it's a Manning last name, relatively low level of high school competition there in Louisiana. Is this the real thing? Is Arch Manning the real deal here? Well, we've not gotten any indication, to use a double negative. We haven't gotten any indication from Austin yet that Manning isn't sort of what a quarterback of this stature is sort of supposed to be. In a game like this, if Texas wins it somewhat easily in excess of a touchdown, you almost wonder if somehow Arch Manning comes into the game and contributes to that for it to happen. I'm at least watching to see if that happens. Or the flip side of it, where Quinn Ewers says, hey, Arch, you may have a bright future, but this is still my team. The Texas quarterback situation on the road at Michigan on Saturday, I find to be pretty fascinating. And I would say the same thing about the quarterback situation in Alabama as they host South Florida on Saturday. Now, look, this is a game in which the point spread's 1,000,000 points or whatever, and Alabama just absolutely obliterated Western Kentucky last week. But this opponent at least has some symbolic value for Alabama. It was a year ago in a game in which Jalen Milroe didn't play. Rumor mill would tell you he was pouting after the Texas game, pouting during practice that week, allegedly because he was having to share snaps as the number one quarterback. The future for Milroe was very much in doubt going to Tampa last year. Alabama won the game, but not in a very pretty fashion. Milroe came back. They were better after that. You remember. Can Jalen Milroe on Saturday kind of be the guy for Alabama against an opponent that he was not able to do that against last year? As I said before, there would be, for me, some symbolic value in that. Kalen DeBoer has said all the right stuff about Jalen Milroe ever since becoming the Alabama head coach. But there's still, for me, a little bit of a suspicion of, is Jalen Milroe really Kalen DeBoer's guy? Is this a guy that he's really going to hitch a wagon to in their attempt to be back in the college football playoff again? I think Saturday against South Florida, the point spread's like 30-some points. I still think there could be some symbolic value for how Milroe plays in a game against an opponent that he was benched when they played a year ago. The third thing I'm going to mention is this. Tennessee goes to Charlotte to take on NC State. I'm going to make more of a case for this on Friday when we do our Go with the Flow show presented by R.S. Andrews. But I think Tennessee's probably pretty good. I do. I think they're better on defense. And I think that Nico Iamaleava gives Tennessee a better quarterback option, even better than Hendon Hooker in 2022. The best quarterback option that Josh Heupel has had since being in Knoxville. I think this is one of those things where after 2 weeks, Tennessee is going to take some of the attention away from somebody else in the SEC. Whoever it is, I don't know. But I believe as we kind of move in towards like the middle part of September, I think we'll do so with Tennessee getting a lot more attention. And obviously going into a neutral side against one of the better ACC teams would be a little bit of a chance to prove that. I think it could be worth watching Tennessee on Saturday. Now, Georgia fans hate the Vols, and I totally get that. I'm not saying what you want to hear when I say that. But at the same time, I'm forced to be honest. I have to be candid. And I do think that Tennessee's got a chance to prove something on Saturday. And I have a sneaking suspicion they will at least prove something here this week, setting themselves up to be a fairly relevant part of the discussion in future weeks. I'd watch the Vols closely on Saturday if I was a Georgia fan, because this is a game at home in November for UGA that could be far more interesting when it's played than it was perceived to be for much of this offseason. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And we'll also get ready to shift to a Kroger Fresh Take with former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm here right now. And here on DawgNation Daily, time now for a Kroger Fresh Take as we welcome in the former quarterback from the Georgia Bulldogs, Jake Fromm, to the program here today. Jake, obviously a great start for Georgia against Clemson on Saturday. Overall, your sort of big picture takeaway, what did you like about what Georgia was able to come out and do this past weekend?
Yeah, I think they came out with a game plan and they executed it. Now, I think they probably started a little bit slower than they wanted to on offense, only scoring 6 points in the first half. But as they really got into the second half, they went in, they made adjustments. They started throwing it around a little bit, just really kind of putting the offensive success on Carson Beck's back. And they went down, they scored points. Man, they got the run game going a little bit. Nate Frazier was a very pleasant surprise. And there was a lot of good things that we saw in the game. One heck of a play from Malachi Starks, Jalen Walker's two TFLs back-to-back, big-time plays to get a 3-and-out. So, man, really love the way they finished, and I think it's something to build on as the season progresses. And, man, I think we haven't seen the ceiling yet, and I think that was just the floor, and I think that's a very good start to the season.
One of the things I try not to do is nitpick too much about a big win for Georgia against a ranked opponent. I mean that both as just sort of a common fan and also kind of a media member who talks to other Georgia fans. I think it's important not to kind of get too granular about what was overall a very good day. But as you pointed out, it was a pretty slow start for Georgia, especially kind of in the first quarter, and really for the first half almost in total, a little bit reminiscent of a year ago. And then the third quarter, I would say things looked completely different. And look, I think a lot of us kind of sometimes don't know kind of how to separate what from what on that. Is this an example of better, sort of halftime adjustments by Mike Bobo based on what he'd seen from the Clemson defense in the first half? is this an example of, as some people have kind of told me, that they just sort of thought Carson Beck just played better in the second half, that maybe he was taking his time a little bit more. Maybe he was, giving plays a little bit more time to develop. You obviously see this so differently because you play the quarterback position. If you were to say why it was that George was better in the third quarter than it had been for the first half, why do you think that was?
Well, first off, I want to start by saying, man, what a great situation the Georgia football program is in when we're concerned with how they're winning, and talking about, well, it could have been, a little bit better here when, we beat a team, 34-3. So like that's a good place for your program to be in. And, my thoughts on the first half, when I'm seeing it with my eyes in real time, I didn't really think they asked Carson to do a whole lot in the first half. I think there was a lot of, kind of sideline to sideline, perimeter passing, a lot, kind of screens, a lot of quick short throws, RPOs, that kind of thing. There wasn't any like, hey, let's drop this thing back. Let's push the ball down the field, hard play action. There wasn't a vertical shot, in my opinion, until 6 minutes left to go in the second quarter. So I think that's just a game plan thing. I don't think really anything from Carson, so to speak. I think whatever they asked him to do, Carson executed and did really well. And there was a lot of pleasant surprises too in that receiver room who stepped up. London Humphreys, Colby Young on the fade ball there, great throw. So there's a lot of things to be excited about. And it's going to be kind of fun to see who emerges, and kind of in that role.
I guess there was some chatter during the TV broadcast where maybe Beck had said something to the effect of being a little too juiced up or something like that. Did you see any evidence of him maybe rushing his process at all? As I said before, you just sort of see this differently than I would. I certainly didn't necessarily notice that in real time, but you would see it differently. Did you see any example of maybe him not being as cool and poised as he perhaps would have liked to have been?
No, you mentioned rushing, and I definitely noticed him use his feet in very timely situations, especially on 1 or 2 third downs where he's converting and using his legs. So that's just the way the football, kind of game has evolved. Carson's obviously going to be a lot more comfortable there in the pocket and delivering and, operating from the pocket. But, man, there is times to use your feet, get out, and convert, especially on third down. There's some great opportunities. But, I'm still going to kind of, stand on this hill of I want to see Bobo and the offense ask more of Carson because I think he's capable of doing more.
I think that's really interesting and well said. One of the things you said, I believe it was last year in our program, I thought was really interesting that as a quarterback, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe what you said is sometimes you felt more pressure in the kinds of games that George is about to play on Saturday because there's this expectation that knuckleheads like me show up to the stadium expecting to see 70 points on the board or something like that. And it's almost like you have to play so well to even achieve the expectations. So confirm that for me if that is true, that you did kind of feel that way during your career. And I guess give me a little bit of a description of what it is like to go into a game like this. Now, the players themselves, and obviously Kirby Smart, they're going to tell you they're just as focused and approaching this like they would any other game. We totally understand that. But we also understand there's a little bit of a different maybe vibe internally in the building of, what is it like when the level of opponent, at least by appearances, is so different than the one you played last week?
Yeah, to me, that is 100% true. That's the way that I always felt throughout my college career. Just because I knew the expectations, the standards were just so high, so unrealistic. You had to go 30 for 30 with 350 yards and at least 3 touchdowns. And if you didn't do that, you absolutely failed that game. So that's just the expectations that just get put on us as players. I remember playing my first home game in Sanford Stadium against Samford as a night game. And, man, kickoff time, I'm just about to just throw up everywhere. Just so absolutely nervous because it was there's a lot of expectations. But, for those guys going in, hey, let's just focus on one drive at a time, go out and operate the offense. And let's not look past this week. Let's think about getting better this week as a football team.
It's obviously a lot going on with the beyond the Georgia Bulldogs in college football. I want to ask you about some of that here coming up. Let me remind folks prior to that, it's our Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm here today on DawgNation Daily. And, of course, Kroger's got you ready for everything you want for game day here right now. one of the best ways to get all of the foods that go on the grill as you're getting ready for that tailgate in Athens on Saturday. How much fun is that? Or the stuff that goes in the cooler. I know how important that is to some of y'all. Great savings and great opportunities and all that at your local Kroger. And if you want the best that Kroger has right now, how about the marvelous new membership opportunity known as Kroger Boost? You get twice the fuel points. So the stuff you're already buying at Kroger anyway gives you a chance to save even more at the fuel pump. In this day and age, finding a way to save money, always a really good thing to do. Kroger gives you a chance with that. When it comes to Kroger Boost, you can also get free grocery delivery there as well. That means more time to enjoy the football season. Kroger's got you on all of that, including everything you need for a great tailgate or at-home watch party. Whatever you have planned for Saturday, Kroger has got you on all of that. So, Jake, a lot of folks are like me, and I know you're kind of the same way. It's like we're watching Georgia really closely, but we're also paying attention to, especially when it's a noon start on Saturday, you roll right into after that. The team that we hate more than anybody else, as I like to call them, the lousy, stinking Gators, they go out and get embarrassed by Miami on Saturday. And one of the things we've had a lot of fun with the last couple of days, really all week long, is just the very strange aftermath that Billy Napier kind of finds himself in, where it seems like, once again, Florida has a coach whose future is very much in doubt. What do you make of kind of how things have played out for Florida, and maybe for Napier in particular, after another really bad loss? A narrow point spread turns into a blowout. Tough times down the swamp right now.
Man, it is just not an ideal situation, to say the absolute least. I mean, to me, I put Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and LSU. I put those four programs, to me, just in a different category. Like, there's no reason for those programs to not find success, in a quick couple-year time span. Like, you got, the state behind you. You got a great fan base, great boosters, had history of success that are in the program. Like, you should be able to find a way to win at the University of Florida. And man, they're just not finding it. I don't know if the disconnect is in recruiting, in the day-to-day operations, and the game planning. Something is missing there. And man, we're just going to have to kind of tune in to see exactly what this is. But man, losing to Miami at home, kind of in that fashion, you got, a clip of an offensive lineman, quitting on an interception basically. And just when effort starts becoming a problem and you see it on the field, that is not a good sign as a head coach, because you're just not holding that standard accountable throughout your entire program. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this develops and how this progresses throughout the season. I just know that buyout is a lot of money, but they're going to have to fix something because it doesn't look like it's getting any better. Well,
I'll finish with this. What's weird is, go back to your time as a recruit. Even then, Florida had been kind of some tough times for a little while, but I'm guessing as a child you were watching Florida playing some big football games. You had at least some living memory of Florida as a good program. Well, now all these years later, think about the current recruits. I mean, they essentially weren't alive the last time Florida, or at least weren't paying attention to football the last time Florida had a real competitive football team. That when you have McElwain to Mullen to Napier to whatever's coming next, I mean, at a certain point, you've got recruits that can't even call back upon a time in which Florida was really a relevant program. That's how strange this is becoming.
100%. I grew up in the 06, 08 Tebow days, and the success that they had there. I just, Auburn did it with Malzahn, Florida did it with Dan Mullen, and Georgia did it with Mark Richt. And, it's just 1 out of 3, hitting 33% there, of firing a 9-10 win a year coach, to get you to that the promised land, to that next level. And then those two programs have taken a step back. So man, it is tough. You don't always win, in those situations, when you're firing coaches who are winning 9-10 football games a year. It's very tough. So, I would just say as a Georgia fan, man, you be happy, because you are blessed that this has worked out in our favor.
I think that's a really good point, Jake, and I'm really glad that you said it that way, because what Georgia attempted to do those years ago, it doesn't always work out quite as smoothly as it has for UGA. That's really well said. Appreciate your time, Jake. Best of luck up there in Detroit. By the way, we haven't talked about this, obviously. The last time we spoke, and I know I've kept you long here, but the last time we spoke, you were just about to find out about your football future. I told everybody on our show you were so kind to spend that time with us, like right before you go and have the big meeting there with the Lions. And yet that day you found out that you're going to be there, part of that organization. We were thrilled about that. Obviously, a well-earned thing for you, we believe. But congratulations on that. I know how hard you have worked to stay in the NFL and make that a part of your life and obviously provide for your family. I think it's a really inspiring thing, just the level of dedication and commitment you've shown to that. So before we let you go, let me please make sure I give you a heartfelt congratulations, because we haven't talked to you since then. Congratulations about going out there and getting that done and make that happen. We're obviously really proud for you.
Yeah, thank you, man. Really, really appreciate that. Yeah, super pumped to be up here. Going to be up here in Detroit, Michigan this fall, and a part of a really good team, really good organization, and hopefully we can win a lot of football games this year. And always the idea is to be the last team standing there at the end of the season. I
love it. That's good stuff, Jay. Congratulations. Look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yes, so happy for Jake Fromm, the fact that he earned that spot there with the Detroit Lions, and as I said before, making a nice salary, providing for his family by playing the game that he loves. I think that's just great news and happy for him. And how about Jake Fromm kind of wading into what has been just a really, really tough week for Florida coach Billy Napier, the embarrassing loss to Miami. And if you've been out of the country, if you've not been able to have access to the internet or TV to watch college football, I think one of the important things that we do on this show from time to time is perhaps remind you of what you've missed. Hey, a lot happens in the course of a busy college football season. Not everybody's aware of everything. So when we can provide some reminders here of kind of how it all went down, we sort of feel it's appropriate to do that. So after the embarrassing loss to Miami, Billy Napier has the press conference where he tries to explain that. And not only did he get beat by the Hurricanes, he also got beat by a water bottle as well. Do you remember this?
Yeah, Coach.
I think we may have this. We can show it to you. Trying to screw the water bottle. Yeah, we got like 8 attempts to try to get enough torque to get this water bottle off. Just try. He's trying so hard. He's trying so hard to get this thing open. What's funny is when he really tries to get into it. At one point in time, he's just giving you the flex. He's trying to get it, and then he can't get it. He wants some refreshment so bad, and he just can't get it. And so eventually, and like one of the saddest things you'll ever see, just has to put the bottle back down. He has to just give up, to say, hey, it's going to take a better man than me to drink this water here right now. He just have to put it back down. And unfortunately for Billy Napier, that's not the only really rough moment that Napier's had at a press conference. Getting beaten by a water bottle is certainly bad enough, but there was also feeling the heat, feeling the pressure, the intensity of criticism from some Florida fans. Napier did one of the things that a coach is never supposed to do. He punched down. He turned on his own fans, kind of turned heel on the press conference, and essentially made fun of some Florida fans for where they come from, for where they live. Apparently they're not sophisticated enough to have an opinion about the job that he's doing. This was another bad moment from Billy Napier here this week from a press conference.
We got to go to work on the football part, and I think we got to become a more consistent team, and we have to execute better. And if we can focus on those things and not necessarily what some guy in his basement saying in rural Central Florida on social media, then we got a chance to get better, right? So
as you know, we did not like Napier's jab at the so-called rural people, because we are rural people ourselves, and we're always going to stick up for rural people. Now, when stuff like this happens, when one of Georgia's rivals falls on hard times, obviously a show like ours, we have a choice. We could worry about ourselves and not pay too much attention to the bad stuff happening somewhere else, or we could try to stir the pot and make it even worse. Well, I think you know what we do in situations like that. Of course, we're going to try to stir the pot and make things even worse. So as we wrap up here today, for our golden shoe, I want to show you what we've done here. In honor of Billy Napier having some trouble with the water bottle and having some issues with the rural fans, here's what we've got here. We can fire up that fight song, get ready to wrap it up here for today. Here's what we've got here for you for a golden shoe. It's the Billy Napier. Let's see if I can turn this the right direction. I got to do some math in my head here. Got to turn this the right way. So if you look on here, it says, hey, with brand new untwistable cap, you can't get the cap off. It's Billy Napier's swamp water here, made in a basement in a rural part of Central Florida. Jay Black and I talked about this earlier this week. Our buddy Cody Chafin's kind of creates the design here on this. I want to make sure I give proper credit for that. It says expiration date very, very soon. In other words, Napier's soon to get fired, we would think. But the water bottle that Napier couldn't open, we've taken possession of that. We've relabeled it in honor of Billy Napier in the swamp there. And the folks from rural Central Florida, they get their last laugh on all that. So not only is that our golden shoe here for today, but it's now going to take a prominent position on our desk right next to Eddie the Blind Squirrel and the Gator hater paraphernalia, a little mockery of Billy Napier. We love that. Great job by our folks behind the scenes to help make that happen. Lousy, stinking Gators. Not only can Napier not open a water bottle, not only is he feuding with the rural people, it's also been 1,398 days since they've beaten the Georgia Bulldogs, and that is a number that's going to keep on climbing. We love it. It's our Gatorade Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. The people are weighing in. They love that. Sage of Eminence, MTG, checks in to say, that's beautiful, BA. I appreciate that, Sage. Thanks for that. Spencer Clark says, Napier's, it's funny stuff coming in from Spencer there on that. Spencer Clark having a good time there in that today. DF checks in to criticize the rural people. This is one of those weird things where I'm probably sort of playing against type in that when the rural Central Floridians are like attacking Georgia, obviously we're against them. In this particular case, I sort of find myself needing to defend them because, look, I'm a rural person too, so I'm gonna step up and defend even the rural Floridians on that. I'm gonna defend them. Alan Hampton says that Florida's problem isn't coaching; it's the program. They've had quality SEC capable coaches. Seriously, who in their right mind wants to wear that putrid orange and blue? I didn't think about that, Alan. You know, it's like you lose a game like that on Saturday, and you have to walk out of there with the indignity of knowing how you're dressed. I think that's probably true. I also want to go to Facebook because I did not hit them as a part of our DawgNation Daily pre-show here today. Chad Buchanan says the T-shirt from yesterday deserves a golden shoe also. Yeah, that was the one from the UCF NIL fund. Indeed, that was the case. Matthew Goodwin mentioning the situation at Appalachia High School. And if you missed this, we began the show today by talking a little bit about that. I thought that Terrence Edwards, speaking on behalf of coaches all across Georgia, I thought he also had some great stuff to say today about what is obviously a terribly hard day for our state, which impacts the high school football community probably in particular. Doug Rayburn having some fun on this in here. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming there as well. Yeah, listen. I could be classy or I could be petty. I think you know which direction we're going to go. Yeah, there you go. Looks good. Looks good, doesn't it? It's a little bit hard for me to spin it the right way on the desk here because I got to think about the reverse image in the screen, but it looks good. Billy Napier Swamp Water, sourced from a basement in rural Central Florida. Expiration date very soon. New, impossible to unscrew cap. With the actual photo, see, I can't quite touch it. Yeah, with the actual photo of Napier, that's trying to get it done. After all these years, Napier, we finally sort of found some like shtick that sticks here, right? It's like Napier's such a non-entity, such a, NPC, non-playing character that, he's just nothing. He's just nothing. Like there's just no feelings conjured about him whatsoever. We sort of finally found something to stick here. I'm glad about that. Let's see what else. Ryan Walker in the comment section. Chris Walshcott checking in to say, how about them dogs? We love that. Chad Buchanan. So we were joking with Chad the other day because he's like, hey, 15-0. I was like, this particular year, you probably need 16. And then Chad's back in here today, 16-0. So there you go, Chad. We're ready for it. We're ready for it. Good stuff. Tennille Calvino, always good to see her. Laughing at snarky BA. Jamie Huff said, can Ohio State get in trouble for tampering with Nate Frazier? I mean, I don't know. They're probably tampering with everybody. Unfortunately, this is just a rule that college football has decided it's not going to enforce. Professional sports teams enforce tampering. College teams programs don't seem to. I think it's ridiculous that they don't, but I think you already know the answer to that. Especially, certain programs are just going to get away with anything. Look, if Michigan can cheat to win a national championship and not really get called out for it, then I'm sorry, no one's coming to save us when it comes to tampering, unfortunately. Jonathan Moore says NPC is a non-playable character, not non-playing character. Yeah, essentially the same thing. Like Napier is like one of the background characters in like Grand Theft Auto, who's just sort of like, he's just sort of there for scenery. Like he doesn't have a functioning role. He's just sort of there to get beat up. Caleb Squire says London McConkey. Matt Rukavina says your ability to taunt Florida is only rivaled by my ability to make Tennessee fans lose their sanity, which I like. Doug Rayburn says, would love to have you call the Gainesville game next week. Boy, I'd love to be back doing that there as well. We've got a great schedule. Thrilled to have Gainesville this past week. And I tell you, they are so good, man. Really, really good. I thought the young quarterback was really impressive. Probably brought a little more arm talent to the game than I maybe expected him to. They've just got, they've got a lot of depth. That's a good football team. And 5A is a fascinating classification. William Camacho also showing some support for Appalachia. As he says, Appalachia strong, and I certainly appreciate that. Robert Evans says those poor, pitiful Gators and those rural fans need to become dogs. Yeah, that's the case. Maybe we should just do sort of an outreach effort. I mean, honestly, like I know I'm not supposed to say this, but like, I mean, you go through like horse country there in Ocala. That's where a lot of the rural people live. It's beautiful land. It's gorgeous land. I mean, it really is. I mean, you forget, like, I don't like the University of Florida, but there are a lot of parts of the state of Florida that I like a good bit. And I love, you drive through that horse country in Ocala, it's gorgeous. And, it's like, I mean, I'd love to tell you I hate everything about the state of Florida. There's that Bugs Bunny meme where he's like sawing off the state. But that's not the case. I spend a lot of time in Florida and love it. It's just the people in orange and blue that I don't like. And, I talk to people all the time that, live in Ponte Vedra or Jacksonville or Orlando. We have a lot of people from Orlando that listen to the show. They're all the time talking about, being surrounded by enemy territory, but they're untouchable right now. You can walk around with red and black on. The Bulldog Club of Jacksonville helped spearhead the Florida license plates with the Georgia logo on them now. I mean, you're sort of like the old days of being like a Roman citizen. You can be, a Roman citizen down in Florida right now. No one can touch you because of all the winning that Georgia's obviously doing. Doug Rayburn says we need to send Napier a Bulldog bottle opener. I like that. Travis McCullough says Florida deserves everything they get. Keith Folds, thanks for the kind words. Randy Hall says, what do you think about Raiola's performance? Is this Dylan Raiola for Nebraska? I didn't see a ton of that. I haven't seen Dayton Raiola from Buford much yet this year either. I do know that Dylan had a good game for the Cornhuskers the other day. Big showdown for him on Saturday against Dion. I'm guessing a lot of us will be watching that pretty closely. Is it D-Bell in the YouTube comment section, if I'm saying that the right way, says, I bet that Florida wishes they still had Dan Mullen. There's a lot of that out there right now. And this is kind of the low-key point that Jake Fromm is trying to make, which you got 3 examples in the SEC, and Jake said this very well a moment ago. You got Gus Malzahn, who was, producing a winning record at Auburn, and for Auburn that wasn't good enough, so they fired him. You had Dan Mullen, who was producing not just winning a record, he's winning like 10 games. He's going to New Year's Six Bowls. But Florida decided that wasn't good enough. They fired him. It's a little bit like what wasn't quite an official firing, but essentially, for all intents and purposes, was exactly that. You have a situation where Georgia looked at Mark Richt winning, like 10 games with regularity, and Georgia basically fired him. Well, of those 3, the only one who was able to take their performance to the next level with the new coach replacing the very good previous coach was Georgia, which, as Jake was pointing out, kind of demonstrates the fact that Georgia making that transition from Richt to Kirby was not as easy as Georgia made it look, as Kirby Smart in particular made it look. And that sometimes when you try to go from good to great, you go from good to essentially a non-existent force. And in the case of both Auburn and Florida, at least thus far, that is what has happened. Yeah, J-Song says the good to great move from Rick to Kirby is the exception and not the rule. It's absolutely true. Stick D says maybe Jimbo could reinvest some of his Texas money in Florida. Yeah, I mean, maybe Jimbo's rich enough. He's like, hey, if you'll give me this job, I'll come in here. I'll help fund some of the NIL stuff myself. Which, I mean, I think some of these coaches should probably do anyway. Jonathan Aaron wonders, like, if you gave this actually be kind of a fun thing. It's like, you know, coaches don't even take calls in their coaches call-in show now. So I'm sure we could never do this, but like, it's like, what if we said, hey, we'll donate 10 grand to the charity of your choice, but we want you to sit here on this desk with me, and I'm just going to give you common household items and see if you can open them. You know, can you open a bottle of Tylenol? You know, can you put your fingers on the little tabs and get the twist thing to turn? Can you open a baby gate? You know, we know you can't open a water bottle. Can you open a jar of pickles? You know, just common household items. Can Napier create enough torque to get them open? I think that'd be a great show. I think it'd be a great show. You know, we should line up SEC coaches. Who can open up common household items? You know, can you take your fingers and sort of pull apart a bag of potato chips? You know, can you do the perforation? Jay Song wonders if Kiffin would leave Ole Miss for Florida midseason. If he could, Lane Kiffin would leave Ole Miss during the middle of a game. Lane Kiffin would leave Ole Miss in the middle of a game if he thought he could get the Florida job. I don't quite know how hireable a lot of these programs view Lane Kiffin to be for a various number of reasons, but Kiffin's sense of loyalty is not keeping him tethered to anywhere. George on tap pointing this out. As Billy Napier has sort of, you know, grown up and like forgotten some of his rural roots, you know, he forgets that like the people in the rural parts of North Georgia or the rural parts of Central Florida, they can open water bottles. They can do it. They can do it. You take a person from like Apopka, Florida or somewhere like that. I mean, they'll open a water bottle with their teeth if they have to. They're getting that thing open. You know, they'll smash it on the side of a desk and get it open if they have to, on a cabinet. They're getting a water bottle open. They are not putting that bottle back down and admitting defeat. They're just not. They are just not. Spencer Clark says, I understand Napier. I've been in the hot seat where I couldn't stand on business. Yeah, I mean, it's actually one of my favorite things about it. I'll be serious for 5 seconds. One of my favorite things about football and coaching in particular is this is just something we don't see in a lot of other forms of life. Whereas when things are not going well for a coach, it's either a bad game, it's a bad season, or it's about to be the very bad ending to a tenure. Like there is still sort of an expectation for decorum. And watching how coaches behave in that is an incredible life lesson. One of the reasons why I think football matters and football is really, really important because it sort of teaches us and demonstrates to us kind of how to be men. And, you know, listen, that's not the, you know, like football is not the only thing that does that, of course, but boy, it's a pretty simple way, to sort of combine a lot of words into one or two small ideas. Like football is really important with that. Like watch a game when it's over with, not Georgia, Tennessee Tech, because, you know, that coach knows he's not going to win. But like watch next Saturday. If Georgia beats up on Kentucky again and in front of his home fans, if Mark Stoops can't quite conjure up a competitive effort and he has to walk out there and shake Kirby Smart's hand, which we see coaches do at the end of every game, like it takes a lot of personal strength to kind of go out there and stand at the middle of the field to say, I tried my best wasn't good enough today, but I'm still going to behave like a man in this situation. Like I've always felt like there was something really beautiful about the coach's handshake at the end of the game. Nobody likes being out there when they lost, But in that moment, you just sort of protect your dignity as best you possibly can, and you live on to fight another day. And there's a real life lesson in that, really very valuable. William Camacho says, old Hottie Toddy will stay put because he doesn't want anything to do with those lousy, stinking Gators. Maybe that's the case. Randy Hall says a good golden shoe be the Three Stooges of Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, and Sling Blade all together as Larry, Moe, and Curly. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, Shane Holiday says the previous SEC Media Days in Dallas had the Mechanical Bowl. The next one should have the Open Water Bottle Challenge. Yeah, I'm all for that. Or as I said before, just other items like, can you open a baby gate? Can you figure out how to do that? Scott Harris says that Mullen's mouth got him in trouble in Florida. Yeah, I would say it kind of did. Kayla Meyer says that Florida fired Mullen way too quick. Plain and simple. Biggest part of the firing is you got to have another coach in mind, even if you don't like him. You can't replace him with someone worse. Leave it to Florida not to understand that. Yeah. I mean, to me, and I said this at the time, this is not Johnny come lately. I said this at the time, that on the heels of Mullen being a failure and McElwain being a failure, I don't care how well you think you vetted a guy like Billy Napier, who had been successful at Louisiana Lafayette and had coached with Nick Saban. There seemed to be a lot to recommend about Napier. I don't care how much you have vetted this guy and how much of a sure thing you think it is. You are still rolling the dice with someone who has not done it at this level. And to me, that was too big of a risk. A non-proven coach at a time in which Florida sort of had to get it right because of how irrelevant they had been for as long as they've been. And Scott Strickland made that mistake. Let me go to YouTube. So I have to totally confess something. I don't know what y'all are talking about with Nate Frazier. What did I miss? Who can sum this up succinctly? What did I miss? Ellis F. Youngin says that listening to BA call a UGA game is on my bucket list. That is incredibly nice to say. I tell you, what a nice thing that is to say. I mean, look, I love, calling my high school games each and every Friday night. Obviously, I grew up a huge fan of, Larry Munson obviously called the Georgia games for a long time. So to have you, put me in a category similar to that, it's one of the nicest things anybody could ever say to me. I appreciate that. Johnny Surf Dog says we go at Kentucky in 9 days. We go at Bama in 16 days. Yeah, it's here. It's on for sure. Don't forget, weird off week for Georgia coming up after the next 2 Saturdays prior to going to Bama, just simply because of the scheduling anomaly, because of the calendar this year. Let's see what else. Memphis Dog enjoying those Gator tears filling the swamp. There are a lot of those here right now. Kayla Meyer says, speaking of football, the Tom Brady "because football is hard" speech gets really good. We played this at one point on the show because it was that good. It's kind of off topic, but worth us playing during the off season. It's just so true. It's just so true. Like, there are so many life lessons contained in football. It's one of the reasons why, dads want to get their kids involved in sports, football and other sports there too, boys and girls sometimes, but especially dads with boys. There's just an extra, I think, thing to that, because a lot of the life lessons that men are supposed to teach boys are not always super easy to articulate. It's important to speak them out loud, but it's not always super easy to say. So when you can point to something and say, watch this, and you'll learn something from watching it, you'll gain some knowledge just from being around it. It's just a really valuable thing. It's one of those reasons why, football technically is just a form of entertainment, but, for a lot of us, it's important that our kids like it. Not just good that they do or fun that they do, but it's important that they do. I grew up a big Star Wars fan. My son likes Star Wars too, but I actually don't care that much if he likes that or not. I've always liked pro wrestling. My son has never really liked pro wrestling as much as I do, although he's sort of getting more into it now. But I don't care if he likes that or not, because that's just entertainment, and there really isn't any value to that beyond just entertainment. But it was important to me that he liked football. And when he embraced football, I was glad that he did. Now, does he end up being a football player? I don't know. But he's at least embraced, being around football and watching it and treating it as important the same way that I do. And that to me was important because of some of the same stuff that others are talking about. Shane Holiday says Florida can't fire Billy without a known entity to replace him, or they're going to lose their entire roster to the portal. Yeah, I think that deep down they probably know that. And so any situation like that, because of this day and age, would probably have to be managed a little bit differently than it would have been in the past. In fact, there are some people who have told me that we may see the coaching carousel spin a little earlier now, just simply because of the desire to sort of protect rosters and try to bring in talent that, especially as the signing period moves up, the coaching carousel may kind of move up with it a little bit. We may see, whether it's Napier, it remains to be seen, but some coaches somewhere, we may see more coaches fired in season than we've seen in the past. DT says, I felt like football would give me an advantage in the business world, a lot of adversity to overcome, and football taught me how to take a lot of crap and keep going. Yeah, it'll teach you that for sure. On Facebook, final comments. Denise Loper checking out. You were about to as well. Al Chandler going back to Charlie Brown and the football. Big Peanuts fan. Love Peanuts. Love Charlie Brown. Love Linus, Lucy. We're very, very big in all of that. I told you earlier that in our household, we very limited in the kind of content that sort of makes its way into our doors and walls. A lot of Charlie Brown in our house over the years. A lot of Charlie Brown in our house over the years. Let's see. Anything else before we go? Back on YouTube one more time. A Dog's Rolling Loud says you give Kirby more than a week to prepare. He takes advantage. Yeah, we'll never know because he's just not going to talk about it, about how much of a look ahead they would do for a game like Kentucky because, A, he's not going to disrespect the opponent that they're playing here this week. But you do sort of wonder, don't you? You do sort of wonder about how they kind of get that done. Armando Black, pardon me. Armando Black TV. I really appreciate that. It means so much to me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Really, really appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say. Michael Turner says football is hard, but life is even harder. Got to finish the drill. Yeah, we say that all the time. It's like, my kids kind of bump into something sort of hard in sports, and they do all the time because sports are just sort of relentless in that way. I say, listen, this is sort of preparing you for what you're going to do when you're no longer playing the sport anymore. And I don't care if you're Chipper Jones. Like one day you stop playing the game. And so therefore being ready for those moments is sort of what sports prepares you for. I think that's exactly right. All right. We're going to go. Really good stuff. Doghouse Lawn Care wondering about a DawgNation invasion to Lexington. Well, I don't know about full-blown invasion, but I'll be there for it, and I'm looking forward to it. One of the fun places we get to travel is Lexington, so looking forward to that. We're going to go for now. And Spencer Clark, thank you for the kind words there as well. As Scott Anderson says, we're praying for our friends in Winder, Georgia. Yeah, I mean, out loud by name. We are praying for so many of those people here today. In fact, I have seen it firsthand, the prayers that are happening because, all of this very close to me in many ways. We started the show by talking about that a little bit today. We try to keep it fun. We try to keep it lighthearted, but we clearly have all of that on our mind. And if you missed our thoughts on that, you can go back to the beginning of the show to hear it. So we will pray without ceasing for all of that. Confusing times, a lot of pain, a lot of heartache, and yet we do our best to try to make sense of it the best we know how. And in my case, that's certainly very limited, but we try nonetheless. So thank you for allowing me to be a voice in your life about stuff like this, about Georgia football and things like that. Also, make sure you check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. And many of you know this, but RS Andrews talk a lot about the air conditioning stuff, but they are a great resource to you when it comes to plumbing issues. And plumbing is one of those deals of, I know a lot of builders they are not messing with plumbing stuff themselves. Like, that's one of those deals of, hey, a little bit of a DIY handyman spirit. I can do anything with a house. Not plumbing. They are not screwing around with that plumbing stuff because it makes a mess. So you want a good plumber, and R.S. Andrews has got some great ones. So find them online, rsandrews.com. That's rsandrews.com. All right, one more big day of shows for us before we get to game day on Saturday. I believe we're going to have a special guest tomorrow in addition to our normal presence of Jeff Santel. So this will be good as a lead into the game. We've had a lot of that lately, and tomorrow's going to be another example of that. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.